Have you been experiencing an uneasy feeling about the modern church? Do you sense that there is something very wrong within the body of believers? Have you found yourself questioning the things that you've been taught about Scripture? Are you bothered by a nagging sense that much of what you were taught is lacking or worse, wrong? Do you feel lost? Are you looking for more? If you've been experiencing any of these feelings, you are among friends here. We felt the same way at one time. We can relate to the prophet Jeremiah when he wrote, "Our fathers have inherited nothing but lies, worthless things in which there is no profit." This is Jeremiah 16:19. We, too, felt lost until we started tearing down the teachings and traditions of man and started to study Scripture for ourselves. And in its original, ancient Near East, Torah-observant Hebrew context. When we started to study Scripture in its ancient context, our faith started to change. We came alive, and we found ourselves drawn back to the ancient paths. This is what Yahweh says: stand by the ways and seek and ask for ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find a resting place for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. This is Jeremiah 6:16. The Scriptures call this ancient path the way. This show is dedicated to serving the kingdom of Yahweh by sharing what we have learned about the way with others. We are aware that there are many other voices out there making similar claims. We just feel that many of those voices are seeking something other than to serve the kingdom, and that they do nothing but cause more confusion as a result. We make no claim to special revelation or anointing. We just try to avoid adding to the confusion by focusing on the Father, His Son, and their kingdom. We are lay people, but we are not without the necessary skills to do proper research. We do believe that Torah still applies to the believer, but we are not part of the Hebrew Roots movement. In fact, most Hebrew Roots groups would reject us. This is because we recognize that Torah is more than just the law of Moses. We are under the new covenant, and with a change in the covenant, there was a change in the way Torah applies to the believers. Search the Scriptures and pray for the wisdom necessary to better understand how the covenant has changed and how these changes govern the way Torah is to be applied to the life of the believer. Then, we try to live, as best we can in our modern world, according to these changes described and lived out by the Messiah and his apostles. And in everything we do, we strive to serve the Father, His Son, and their kingdom by serving other believers and helping to make stronger disciples as we go.
Well, welcome. And as you probably knew if you were watching the shows earlier this week, I'm not Joe, I'm Charlie. And Joe is off for a birthday party today. And you'd think, well, my goodness, a birthday party, that's more important than the show. Yeah, this one is, because this gentleman is 100 years old. He was one of the few survivors from the first wave in Iwo Jima, and he also served in Korea and Vietnam, and he's a war hero. And Joe was fortunate to know him. He was his ROTC commander there back in high school years, and so he's off celebrating with him, which is a good thing. So you're stuck with me today, and yeah, this is probably going to be one of the less watched shows, because we're going to be talking about biblical Hebrew again. Yeah, this is not easy stuff. And I hope if you're serious about learning Hebrew, it's going to take some work. So if you watched the first show, I hope you've been practicing your Aleph Bet. And that's what we're going to focus on today again. We're going to go through the Aleph Bet again, and then we're going to talk about some little nuances about the Aleph Bet, some additional information that will hopefully help you a little bit further on. And these classes, I'm going to be doing them periodically, but I'm only going to take you so far, because the way this works is, in learning Hebrew, you really need a dedicated teacher, a one-on-one teacher, preferably, or at least in small groups, to really get your Hebrew down and learn. I've learned that over the the several years that I've been learning. Because I did have a grand evil plan when I first started this. I was going to do a YouTube channel and teach everybody biblical Hebrew for free online, and so that everybody could learn. And I quickly found that that's not going to work in that format. So, but I am doing this at least to wet your whistle a little bit, give you an idea of what it's like, and maybe from that you'll have a greater desire to learn. In the show notes for today's show, there is a link to it's listed under Transformed by Hebrew is the title, and that link will actually take you to my Hebrew teacher. And so if you're interested in actually, weekly classes, she teaches both biblical Hebrew, modern Hebrew, and even Greek, because I just started Greek. So if you're interested in those things, she's an asset available to you. And that's where you can get real instruction. And also in the show notes today, I'm going to be using a PDF that's basically it's the Hebrew textbook that I've been using for my Hebrew class, and it's a PDF version of it. It's a little bit maybe a little bit abbreviated, but it's good enough for the show to give our graphics rather than me creating my own PowerPoints and such. It seems to work. At least we're going to try it today. Hopefully it's going to work okay for me to explain what I'm talking about and give you the visuals there. But the entire thing is available again in the show notes. It's a downloadable PDF. So you'll have that entire resource available to you. So the first about half an hour of the class here, we're going to go over again the Aleph Bet, like I said, and then we're going to take a break. And then the second half, Joe has asked me to provide instruction on some of the tools that we use on the show. Joe and I use these tools, and I think they're beneficial to you as well. And I'm going to kind of go over those tools, what's available online and for download and such. There will be one tool that I can't actually show you because I don't have that one, but Joe does. But we'll mention that, and I'll explain a little bit about that if that's something you're interested in. But that tool is not free. It does cost money, and it's for serious students that really want to dig in and have some additional resources. So with that said, let's see if I can actually get this document up here, and I'm going to, let's see how big. Ooh, is that as big as it's going to go? That's as big as it's going to go. Ooh. All right, so this might not work as well as I was hoping it would work, but I hope it's good enough here. Sorry, allergies. But this is just the list of the Hebrew Aleph Bet, and I'm basically going to quickly go through this. We covered this in the last class, but of course, with things like language, repetition is a good thing. And so we've got 23 consonants in biblical Hebrew, and it starts with Aleph. And you can see the symbol here as we go down through here. And this is generally silent. Aleph is usually associated with a vowel. Usually, there are places where it's what's called quiescent, where it does not have a vowel associated with it, but those are rare occasions. And we'll talk about vowels. We might get a little bit into vowels today. We'll see how far we get. And then the next letter is Bet, and this is like the English letter B as in boy. And this also has a second pronunciation. We'll talk about that a little bit later on when we get into some of the nuances of the Aleph Bet. And then the next one is Gimel, and this is pronounced like the English letter G as in God. And the next letter is Dalet. And again, this is like the English letter D as in day. And next we have Hey. And this is like the English letter H as in hey. Gee, that's the actual way you say the letter in Hebrew. And then we have the Vav. And you'll see here under the name, it says Wav here. And then they have W as in way. Well, this is another one we'll talk about in a little bit more detail a little bit later on here. It also has two possible pronunciations. The W here is in way, or a V as as in vine. And then we have Zion, and this is like the English letter Z as in Zion or zebra. And then we have our first guttural letter here, Chet. And the way I teach it, it shows here that the CH as in Bach. So if you know German, you know the correct pronunciation of Bach is with that guttural. But when I was in German class, because it's using a German letter or a German word here to show how this guttural is pronounced, my German teacher said, okay, say the word huge. And when you say that, you actually feel in the back of your throat that feeling back there, and that's how the gutturals is made, like the beginning of huge. So it's that kind of a way of forming that vocalization. So hopefully that's helpful to you. The next letter is Tet, and that's pronounced like the English letter T as in toy. And then we have Yod, and this is like the English letter Y as in yes. And then next we have Kaf, and that's like the letter K as in king, but this is another one we'll talk about in a little bit where it has more than one pronunciation, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. Following that, we have Lamed, and Lamed is similar to the English letter L as in lion. And then we have Mem, like the English letter M as in mother. And then Nun, which is like the English letter N as in now. And then we have Samech. That's like the English letter S as in sin. And then we have Ayin. Now, Ayin, it says here, is silent. And generally speaking, that's the way it is pronounced today. But they believe that in previous times, it had a guttural sound, kind of like a G sound. In it, I don't know exactly how they pronounce that, but that's where you get Gomorrah. It's kind of like that, and that's how they change it to Gomorrah in English. But usually today, in the way that they use it in the more modern way of pronouncing it, it's more silent. So they just say Amora usually for that city name. But just a little thing about how they believe it may have been pronounced in earlier times. And then we have Pei, and Pei is another one that we'll talk about in a little bit. It says here that it's a P sound as in pastor, but you'll find that it has an additional vocalization as well. And we'll talk about those in detail in a little bit. Following that, we have Tzadeh, and this is a combination sound like a TS in English. So it's like the ending of the word boots. So it's that TS sound. Many times when they transliterate this, they transliterate it using a Z, and I don't like that because it's really not the way it should be pronounced, but that's just what a lot of people do, unfortunately. And then we have cough, and that's got a K sound like in the English word king. And then resh, and this is like the English letter R as in rain. And then we have sin and shin. Now you'll notice here that sin has the little dot over the left side of the letter, and then shin has the little dot above it on the right side of the letter, and that's how you tell the difference. So sin is just a regular S as in sin, and shin is the SH sound that we have in English like ship. And then the final letter is tav. And that's a T again, like the English word toy, beginning with that. So that's the Aleph Bet. That's the consonants of the Aleph Bet. And so let's see here. Oh, got to get my right thing here where I'm navigating. And we mentioned this in the last class as well, but again, a little bit of review is warranted here, because this is kind of something that you're probably not familiar with, because this is foreign to the English language for sure. But these five letters have what's called a final form. And so the appearance of these letters change when the letter appears at the end of a word, like this first one here. You see what the, this is a cough. And so you see what the regular form is. It looks kind of like a backward C here in English. But in the final form, it looks almost like a dalet. And this is one thing we'll talk about a little bit later. But you'll notice that the tail of that letter goes down below the line. And that's how you can differentiate it. So it appears differently. As the example here, they use the word derech. And so it uses the final form there as it appears in the end of the word. And the next one that has this is mem. You can see the regular form here, and then the final form just kind of looks like a box almost. And they're using the word am here for nation or people. And you see that it appears with the final form. And then noon, you'll see the regular form here. And then again, the final form looks very much like a vav. Again, we'll talk about this in a little bit. But again, it extends down below the line. That's the way you differentiate it. And and they use the word zakan here for the purpose of showing it here at the end of the word. And then we have pay. And of course, you see the regular in the final forms here. And they use the word kesef here, which is the word for money or silver. And again, it appears at the end of the word. And sade, you see both the regular and final forms here, and they use the word eretz here, which is the word for earth or land. So here we go. This is fun stuff. I know it's boring as heck, but that's what happens when you first get in here. Now, these are what's called the beged kafat consonants. They use this mnemonic here to help you to remember these. And these are the letters that I talked about earlier that have more than one vocalization. And the difference here is you'll see in these letters, and unfortunately this thing is not big enough for you to see it as well as I'd like. I apologize for that. I'm going to see if I'll have to see if I can find some way to blow this up when it shows up here on our presentation in the future. But if you'll notice with the bet here, in the first instance, you'll see that there's a little dot inside there. That's called a dagesh lene. And that indicates that it has the hard pronunciation of B as in boy. But if it does not have that dot in there, then it's a softer pronunciation and it is pronounced with the V as in vine. And now with Gimel, it has the same thing, but in modern pronunciations, we don't really differentiate between them. But it does have here the way they believe it was pronounced in earlier times. G is, with the dagesh lene, it's G as in God, and without it would be as in aghast. That kind of combination of the GH there in former times, at least. And with Dalet, again, the same kind of thing, although there are some dialects that still use this mnemonic today as far as the differentiation. I believe in Sephardic pronunciation, they use this still. Um, but when it has the dagesh lene, it's the D is in day. But if it does not, then it's pronounced with like the TH of the. So it's like a kind of pronunciation. And then we have kaf. And with the dagesh lene, it is a hard K as in king. But without it, it's the CH like in Bach, like we talked about earlier. So it's that guttural sound without the dagesh lene. And then pei, we actually call these pei and fei. With the dagesh lene, it is a P as in pastor, but without it, it's an F sound like the PH, in alphabet, the PH or phone. So it's that PH sound that we have in English. And then finally, tet. Again, this is another one that is really not used in our modern way of pronouncing it, but in the past that they believe it was pronounced in this manner. With the dagesh lene, it's a T as in toy, and without, it's more kind of like the dalet that we had above, kind of like with the TH as in thin, that kind of a vocalization there. Isn't this fun? We have all these rules and we're already breaking them. So this is what's fun about Hebrew. It's, people say that English is the hardest language to use because we have so many rules that we break in the English language, because English has a lot of borrowed words too from other languages and such. And Hebrew is very similar in that way. They've got a lot of rules and we break them all over the place. So it does make it a little more complex and a little more difficult to learn. All right, so here we go. These are letters, like I talked about a little bit as we went over the original Aleph Bet, that a lot of these letters look very similar to one another. And so these are some things I'll talk about each one in turn and just talk about some little things that you can look for to try to differentiate between these when you see them in text. The problem comes into being is that if you are looking at older documents, especially actual Torah scrolls where they were written on, leather or parchment or things like that, many times the ink they would use would run and stuff. So sometimes some of these things I'm going to show you are not as obvious, and the only way you can really see it is in context and things like that. So it gets it even more confusing sometimes. So the first one is bet and kaf. You see that they look pretty similar. The bet is a bit more squared off on the right-hand side, and you'll see there's just a little teeny bit of a tail at the bottom there below the bet. So those are the things you'll look for to do your best to differentiate between these two letters. The gimel and the nun. I'll bet you guys are keeping up. Yeah, Natasha. Yeah. This is not fun, is it? But hey, I've been doing this for over 6 years now. So yeah. But you'll see here that the gimel and the nun look kind of similar. The gimel has a little tail off to the right at the bottom there on the letter, where the nun is just kind of squared off there at the bottom. And then you've got the third one here, which is 3 letters that look very similar. And I confuse these sometimes myself, depending on the script that I'm reading. Sometimes it's the scripts are not as easy to delineate between these ones here, especially between he and chet, because the only difference really between the he and the chet is that the he has a little bit of a space on the left side just below where the line comes across horizontally. There's a little break there, where the chet there is no break. And the tav, between a chet and a tav, the only difference is see that little teeny bit of a foot there on the left-hand side that sticks off to the left. That's about the only differentiation between a het and a tav. And again, with the hey and a tav, you've got that little space there and a little foot. Those are the two differentiations there. And we talked about sin and shin earlier, where you're just looking at the dot on top. If the dot is on the left-hand side, it's a sin. And if it's on the right-hand side, it's a shin. And then the fifth one here is a final mem and a samech. You'll see they look very, very similar. The mem is pretty much just a box, and the samech is a little more rounded, but they both kind of have that little teeny tail on the top left. So this can be difficult, but keep in mind with this one, this is one of the key things. The mem will only appear as the last letter of a word because it's a final form. So if it's anywhere else in the word and you're not sure, it's going to be a samech. But if it's on the end of the word, then you might have to determine, is it a mem or a samech? So that'll help you a little bit there in the context. Then we have dalet and resh. You'll see that they look very similar, except the dalet is more squared off, and it has a little bit of a tail going to the right there at the top. Before the vertical bar there, there's a little bit of a tail there, where the resh is completely rounded off there. And next we have tzadeh and ayin. And again, not a lot of difference here. You see that the tail on the tzadeh kind of goes off to the right and then jots back to the left. Whereas with the ayin, it just jots to the left. That's the only difference there. So those can be difficult in certain circumstances. And then we have the vav and zayin. The difference here is you see that the vav just has the little, kind of foot or arm or hand or whatever you want to say on the top there that goes off to the left, where zayin, it has it going across the entire top. And it's usually, depends on the font, usually is tilted a little bit, like you see this tilted to the, tilted down to the right a little bit. Not all fonts do that, unfortunately, though. So you can't always rely on that moniker there to help you. Then also you have the difference between a vav and a final noon that I talked about earlier. And you'll see that there's not much help with this one other than the length of the tail. If the length goes below the line, it's a final noon. If it doesn't, it's a vav. And of course, the other point is if it's not at the end of the word, it's always going to be a vav, because the final noon only appears at the end of the word. And then the final one here on this one is the final kaf and the final noon. And these ones aren't too hard because the final kaf usually is easier to differentiate because it does have the longer horizontal line on top, where the final noon is much shorter, but they can be confused in some fonts. Then we're going to talk just briefly about consonants that sound alike. And you probably caught this as we were going through that, hey, there's a couple of these that sound just like they're the same thing, and they are pretty much very similar. You've got tet and tav, the tav with the dagesh lene, as it explains here. And both of those have the T sound as in toy. And then you've got kaf and kaf. And that's again with the kaf with the dagesh lene. So it's the harder sound. And they both have the K sound as in English, as in king. And then of course, samech and sin with the dot on the left-hand side, both have the S sound as the word sin. Isn't this fun? All right, let's see here. Yeah, we can cover this part. We'll probably get to this part and then probably take the break here. Or we'll look at maybe the next slide and see what we got coming here. Yeah, this one won't take very long. I mentioned this briefly when we were going through here that the Gimel, Dalet, Tet, and Vav, they have a traditional pronunciation, but in the modern pronunciation, they're just pronounced as it's shown here. The Gimel is the G with God, the Dalet with D as in day, and the Tav with T as in toy, and Vav is V as in vine. That's the way we do it modernly, but it does include the traditional pronunciation, at least what they believe it was in previous times. So let's take a look and see what we got next here. All right. I guess what we'll do, we've got a little bit of time, so I'll cover just a little bit. I'm just basically going to wet your whistle on vowels. I won't have time to go over the entire thing today, but you'll see here, the top here is what you would see in a traditional Torah scroll. If you had an actual Torah scroll, you'll see that there is no vowel pointing. All you have is the consonants. But what happened, as I explained in our first lesson, somewhere around the 800s or so AD, the Masoretes came up with this vowel pointing system to help with preserving the language and the pronunciation of the language. And when they did this, they identified these different symbols that we'll go over in our next lesson that reflect what the vowel pronunciation is for those particular words. And there's, a bunch of them. You'll see here the little red indications here. You'll see that they have the vowel symbols there, and that most of them appear below the letters, but you will see if you look, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the fourth word to your going from right to left, because we read Hebrew right to left on the bottom there, in that fourth word, Elohecha, right above the lamed there. It's very hard to see on this. I'm sorry. I'm going to try a different way of showing this next time, that I think I'll be able to blow this up a little bit bigger for you. But there's a little red dot up there, and that's a holum. That's the only one that appears above the line in biblical Hebrew. So that's what we're doing, and next we'll be going into this, but we're going to take a break here shortly. Let me get this out of here. There we go. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and then what we're going to do is going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some online tools that you can use to help you in your biblical studies, both in English and in helping you to start, if you're trying to reach back into the Hebrew language, and this would also apply to Greek, that you can use some of these resources to help you to understand some of that. So without further ado, Charlene, we call her Charlene today because she's doing my job, but Natasha, will you give us a break, please, for 3 minutes? Well, welcome back. And I'm sure you all are so excited. And I'm sure that you have been riveted in the first half an hour learning about just the Aleph Bet of Biblical Hebrew. So now we're going to lower it a little bit here. And we're going to talk about some English stuff and how you can actually get to the Hebrew too. But basically, I'm going to talk about uh, 4 different tools that are available to you, 3 of which are free. One of them is not, but if you're really serious about biblical studies, you might consider getting into the other one. And I'll explain a little bit about that when we get there. But the first one I want to talk about, and you see us use this all the time on the show, and it's Bible Hub. And let me see. Yeah, I can put myself here for right now, and I can bop myself out if I need to. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. This is Bible Gateway. We will be talking about Bible Hub, but that's next one. This is Bible Gateway, and it's simply a website. You just go to BibleGateway.com, and it has here, you'll see you can create a free login. And when you do that, you can do things like you've seen where Joe uses this and he highlights it and things like that. And yes, Natasha, thank you. Yeah, all these resource links to these are all in your show notes as well. But you can highlight them, and there's links up here for like resources. You can go to the Hebrew and Greek directly here and things like that. But right up here, I want to pop this here and just show you. Right now I'm on the ESV, the English Standard Version, but if you go through here, there is a plethora of different Bible versions available to you. So if you're interested in, hey, what does this other translation say? And because a lot of times, especially if you're not fluent in Hebrew or Greek, it helps to look at what other translators did and how they phrased a certain difficult passage in the scripture, and how some of them actually translate it very similarly and things like that. And that can give you clues as to what you're dealing with. And like I said, you can also highlight in here and things of that nature. So this one's fairly straightforward. You can in the search bar up here, like right now, I just brought up the first chapter of Genesis, but you can put in here. You can just put in like a single verse, and it'll search it. You can put semicolons in here and such, and it'll bring up both of them and things like that. So you can do searches, and you can search for different words and things like that as well. So like, oops, let me, yeah. So just like, okay, we want to know what Hebrew, where that appears in the scriptures, and here it'll find all those words within the version of the Bible that you have selected, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty good for general navigating through the scriptures and searching for things, looking at different Bible translations and such like that. Yes, Natasha.
This is the site we use for the congregation when we do the readings, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
All right, cool.
Yeah, because what we do, if you are one of those that attends our Shabbat services, when we have the Torah readings, that's one of the things that Natasha does, is she goes up here and she puts all those Torah readings in here in a line, and it pulls them all in, and then we display them on a television screen within our sanctuary, and then we also share them on the screen for those viewing remotely. So it works really nice for things like that. And like I said, it's got many different Bible versions available to you, and there's even more tools available in this. I don't use all the tools available in Bible Gateway because I use Bible Hub more, and I'll explain that here in just a second and why I use that one. But that's just a quick overview of Bible Gateway. And so now we're going to switch over to Bible Hub. And Bible Hub, this one is what I use most specifically. I use this one when I'm dealing with Hebrew. And so like right now we've got, well, let's see, I haven't looked up anything yet. So I'm just going to click, first I'm going to click interlinear. It's already got Genesis 1:1 up here. So that's the default. So we just went there. In this, you've probably seen with Joe when he's been doing a podcast and talking about a specific verse, and he'll bring it up in the interlinear here. And you'll see that this shows the first verse of Genesis. And of course, Hebrew reads again from right to left. So it's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. And you see it's got in the beginning created God the heavens and the earth. So it's got the English below it, and it's a very wooden translation because this is doing a word for word exchange here. But if you go above it, you can click on the number up here, and that's the Strong's number. And this brings up the Strong's Concordance here at the beginning. And you just go through here. It gives you basically a little bit about the actual word, the etymology, just a little bit of etymology there, Strong's. And then it's got like the NAS Exhaustive Concordance. Then you've got Brown Drivers Briggs, and Brown Drivers Briggs, and many words will go on forever. Like this one, you'll see it goes on and it gives you definitions. It gives you references where that particular definition is used, and so on and so forth. Brown Drivers Briggs is the Bible, the Bible of Bible in Hebrew, if you will. It is the academic gold standard for biblical Hebrew grammar. So if you really want to know, go to Brown Drivers Briggs. The Strong's Concordance, everybody always talks about Strong's. Strong's is a concordance. It is not a lexicon. What's the difference? The difference is a concordance just gives you the information for where and how often a word appears in a specific text. The Strong's is tied directly to the King James Bible. It's all it's connected to. If the word does not appear in the King James Bible, it doesn't appear in Strong's. Okay, that's how this works. So it's useful for finding the number of occurrences, where it is, and things like that. But beyond that, it does give you some definitions and things. But if you really want to dig down in definitions, you need to go to Brown Drivers Briggs, because that's an actual lexicon. And a lexicon is basically a dictionary, but it's a little bit more than a dictionary. It goes into more of the etymology of words and also where they're used and how they're used differently. And you'll see where they've got so many different references here. And then down below that, they've got the topical lexicon. This is just some summaries of how the word is used throughout the scriptures. And that is often very useful. And then it goes on, and sometimes it'll give you, like here, it's giving you eschatological ramifications. And then it's got like the pastoral and ministerial applications. Of course, there's going to be some biases by whoever created this in Bible Hub, but generally it's pretty good. And then if you look off to the right-hand side here, you see this big long list here. This is all the instances of that particular Hebrew word in the Bible. And it shows you in the different translations here. It shows the Hebrew, the NAS, NASB, and the KJV, and I guess that may be the International. I'm not sure which version that is, INT. But you'll see going down through here, it'll show you all those instances, and it goes on for a long, long way. So that's very useful in getting down into the Hebrew. Now, one other, and this is just a different format for the way that you can get to this stuff. I usually click the Hebrew tab. If it'll click, there it goes. Okay. And this is just a formatting thing. It basically provides you the same information as the interlinear. I just like this format better. This is just a personal preference. You know, if the interlinear works for you, fine, use that, not a problem. This one just, for me, seems to work better. And like, I think you can even see here, I think it's a little more readable too, especially if you're on like a phone or something like that. It's a little more readable, I believe, especially when you get old like me. So this is just a different format. Again, you've got the Strong's on the left, so you can click that just like we did before and get all that Strong's information. And then it's got the Hebrew word, the English translation, and then it has this in the interlinear as well. I didn't mention that earlier, but it has the morphology of the word, basically what kind of word it is here. This is a preposition. It shows here that it's got a preposition here. That's the bet at the beginning of a bet a sheet. That's a preposition that means in, by, with, that kind of thing. And then it's a noun, and it's a feminine singular noun. And then the next one, it shows it's a verb, and it's a Cal perfect third masculine singular. Now, to you at this point, that is Greek. It doesn't mean anything to you, but for somebody that's studied Hebrew and understands the verbs and things like that, that gives you an idea of how you should translate this word, whether it's present tense, past tense, or things like that, how it's used grammatically. Like this is a third masculine singular, so it's connected with it's connected with the next word, God, Elohim. So Elohim here, even though Elohim is a plural, it's connected with a third masculine singular verb. So this would indicate to most scholars, their understanding is that they're using this as a masculine, a majestic plural, where it's actually meaning only one God, but it's used in that kingly kind of thing where a king is kind of king over the entire kingdom. So it's plural in that vein, but it's actually singular grammatically. That's getting into a lot of grammar stuff. But anyway, that's just information you get here. Like get down here to this et here, where you've got the direct object marker. And we talked about that before in our podcasts and such. And on through here, you can see how the word is used. So that's why I like Bible Hub. Specifically, that's now you can actually read different versions of the Bible here as well. You see across the top, you've got the NIV, NLT, ESV, and so on and so forth right across the top. So you can read this just like you do in Bible Gateway. Both of these, Bible Gateway and Bible Hub, you can get to some commentaries and so on. And you've got direct access to Strong's Concordance here and commentaries and such here and on this other row. So it's very useful. So those are two online resources that are very helpful. But I'm going to switch modes here, and there's a link to download this particular software in your show notes. This is called eSword. It's available, I believe, on many different platforms. I'm not sure all of them. I know it's available on Windows. It's also available on Android. I believe it's available on Apple. And it may even be available on Linux. I think there may be a Linux version out there too. I'd have to double check that one. But if you have questions about that and can't figure it out, let me know and I'll go look at it. But this, again, is a resource. This one is an app on a phone or a desktop application, so it's not actually online. And you can download various versions of the Bible, like you see here that I've got ESV loaded up here right now. And I've got, I'm in in the New Testament here. So let's see, Greek, Greek New Testament. So here we go. All right, there you go. You can see what it looks like in Greek here. My 1 Corinthians 5 here. That's a Greek version of the New Testament. And then if we back down here to the Old Testament, oh, yeah, let me click on Old Testament. And let's see, there we go. All right, and this gives me the Old Testament. And you'll see here, as you notice here, there's no vowel markers here. This is just like it would be in a Torah scroll. And then they've got this one here with Old Testament Plus that adds the Strong's numbers. You can click on the Strong's and get that information. And you've got various different things here. And then there's commentaries that you can download and use. I use this like when I'm creating messages that I'm going to give on Shabbat at our local congregation, or if I'm prepping something for the show here and I'm doing up slides and stuff, I'll usually use this to locate the stuff in the scriptures. You can search, like, we searched on Bible Gateway. There's a search function there. You can look for specific words and things like that and find them within the version of the Bible that you have highlighted. And so this is very helpful. And like I said, it's also got mobile versions and such that are available. And again, this is free for use. Now, some of the versions of the Bible are proprietary. And if you want to download those, there may be a charge to download certain versions of the Bible that are copyrighted and that eSword has not gotten a copyright release for, but they do have agreements where you can purchase those and download them. So that's eSword. So let me pop this out of here. And there's one more thing. Oh, I lost my mouse. There we go. I'm looking at another screen here. So the last thing we're going to talk about is logos. Or they call it logos. There's different ways of pronouncing the O in Greek, depending on which teachers you had. It depends on how you pronounce that. And there is a link in your show notes for that software. If you've been following the show for any period of time, you've heard Joe mention Michael Heiser. He worked on this project when he was still with us. And it's through basically that's who was one of his main employers, and they still produce this software. Now, the software now is only available, to my understanding, with a subscription basis. The basic subscription is like $9 a month or whatever, and it goes up different levels from there. And it's quite powerful. It comes with several books and things in addition to the scriptures that will help you in studying the scripture. This is on the level of a scholarly, someone doing scholarly research. This would be someone, that's really dedicated and, working on a master's or a doctorate thesis or something like that. This could be very helpful to them. And the books that you do buy through it, my understanding is those are yours forever, but some of the AI and searching and things like that mechanisms are associated with a subscription that you would have to subscribe to. But I'm just mentioning that because if you're really serious and you really need to dig down in, it's available to you. Joe has got an earlier version of it when it was still a standalone application, and he paid a good penny for it. And he's still learning to use it and stuff. But I just mentioned that as, something out there that is there, that if you're going to that level of research difficulty and such like that, it's there for you. So I think I'm about done today, at least with our content. So I'll tell you, it's just a personal thing. This morning has been a little little touchy for me because I had some family issues just before the show that, almost kiboshed the show. But as part of this, I had a scam phone call, and they did pretty good job, but they missed a few key details that, got my spidey senses tingling. And I'm like, this is sounding more and more like a scam the more you talk to me. But the thing is there was some truth to it. And there was quite a bit of truth to it. They had a few points that were not quite right when I after I got off the call and went and investigated and found out what's really going on here, because there were a few things that had happened, and I'm not going to get into personal details here, but there were some things that have happened over the past couple of weeks that, it was a kind of plausible scenario. But be careful out there, guys, because they're getting good at this stuff. Because you can use AI and other things, and you can, they didn't do as good a job as they should have. They could have done some better things. If I were to have put this scam together for them, I would have said, no, instead of saying this, you should have said this, and it would have been more believable. And, but, the key thing was when they were talking about, they were trying to scam money from me, of course. And they said, well, we can take payment through this, bunch of platforms that I had never heard of. And then they said Venmo. And this was supposedly from a government agency. Okay. And the minute they said that, I'm like, nope, you're a scammer, and stuff. And they, they stayed on the line for a little bit. They had put me on hold saying they were doing something. And I went and talked to my wife, and I was telling her all the reasons I thought this call was a scam. And by the time I got through all those reasons, telling my wife, they hung up on me because they're like, okay, we're done with this guy. He's not going to fall for it. But the reason I mentioned that is, this world, we've got a lot of evil going on out there, as you guys know. And I'm just thinking forward. I was thinking about, well, Joe's going to have a show for you Monday, I'm sure. And, with all this going on in the Mideast and all, everything that's going on, there's plenty of this to go around. But that's why we're here to try to help you navigate some of this stuff so that you don't get scammed and things like that. And so that you can differentiate between truth and not truth. Yes, Natasha.
So what you're saying is their info was almost correct.
Yes.
They had a lot of facts, and they were almost right.
Yeah, they had enough to make their presentation plausible. So it but as I talked to a few other people too, and trying to get the real details, and immediately those people told me, no, well, these offices would never call you to get money for this purpose and blah, blah, blah. That was a scam call and stuff like that. So, but it was, cause they're all over the place, and they do that, especially they target, I'm older. I'm an older person, not as old as some, but a lot of times they'll target parents, grandparents, and so on and so forth, saying, oh, hey, your grandson or your son is, in trouble with the police or had an accident or whatever. And we need money to do this, and this. And a lot of times there'll be some pieces of truth in there, and they'll have enough information about your loved one or whatever that they can sound really convincing. And, and being, oh, you love your grandson or your son or whatever, you want to help them, and you'll open up that wallet and boom, your money's gone. So, just be careful, because man, they're out there, and they're getting better and better. So, but anyway, enough of that.
So you're able to discern that it wasn't quite right, though.
Oh yeah. There was, like I said, I did find there is some truth to some of the things that they told me, and we're working through that, trying to get more details. But unfortunately, the way the system works, I can't get all the details yet, because it's got to go through some more parts of the process before I can get more details. But I know basically what's going on at this point. But yeah, it was interesting.
Huh. Haven't we been told something about knowing the difference between true and almost true?
No, oh
Right and
yeah,
almost
yeah.
right.
That's why I'm saying that's why I brought
Huh.
it up on the show, just because that's the way it is. You know, that's the way the adversary works. Is he will give you a glass of water. It's 99.99% water. It's just that 0.09% of arsenic in there that's enough to kill you. And that's what we got to watch out for. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you can't. It's not as easy to figure this stuff out. So, you know, even the elect can be deceived. That's what the Bible teaches you. You know, they say that with a question, but you know, I believe the answer to that is yes, the elect can be deceived. You know, that's what the adversary is trying to do. If he can do that, he will. And that's why we have to be on our guard all the time. And that's why it's important to, you know, study these things and be aware of how these things happen. That's the only reason I mentioned it on the show is, you know, hey, this stuff happened. And, you know, if somebody, you know, if I can help somebody to avoid this stuff, yeah, but if they're asking for gift cards or Venmo or PayPal or, you know, Cash App or something like that, and they say they're from like the IRS or a sheriff's department or a hospital or you know, something like that, chances of that being a scam is near 100%. So that's one of the key things to look for in these kind of scams. So sometimes they'll ask you to do gift cards and things like that too, when you definitely know, or Western Union, that's been a big one along the way. So yeah. So that's kind of an addendum to the finance class I did a while back. So guard your finances. But other than that, with that, we got Monday. We'll have a Manic Monday. Tuesday, we'll be moving along in Genesis. Wednesday, we'll continue in Jeremiah. Thursday, we should be finishing the Bible, the Bible Amongst the Myths, or I think is what the title of that book is. We should be finishing that one. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that after we finish that, he may be starting his Islam class in that slot. We'll see what Joe decides, but that's probably what'll happen. And then we should be back in the Judah Scepter and Joseph's Birthright next Friday, as we usually do in this time slot. So with that, I hope you all had a wonderful Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. And we've got Shabbat coming up this evening. So we'll say Shabbat Shalom. And with that, we'll see you either tomorrow if you join us for Shabbat services, or on Monday for Manic Monday. So have a great day. Bye-bye.